It's afternoon on September 19th, 1356, and the English archers are worried about their arrow supply. The battlefield at Poitiers is in chaos. French infantry and dismounted knights carrying out massive assaults. English longbowmen shooting in disciplined ranks, war cries echoing across the field. But in the archer lines, concern is spreading. An archer named William pulls his last arrow from his quiver. His hands shake as he knocks it. Around him, other archers are doing the same, checking their bundles, their faces tense as they count what's left.
Chief!
Someone shouts down the line.
Where are the supplies?
Another archer screams toward the rear. William looses his final arrow. It flies true, strikes a French man-at-arms in the chest. The man falls. But there are hundreds more coming, waves of them, and William's quiver is empty. He looks back desperately toward the English camp. Where are the supply wagons? Where are the arrow bundles? The baggage train should be positioned in a sheltered area behind the hedges and vineyards, but the resupply route to the archers is narrow and difficult to navigate.
Hold the line! Reinforcements coming!
A sergeant runs past, shouting. But reinforcements won't help if there's nothing to shoot. This is the nightmare scenario for any medieval army. English longbowmen were the deadliest weapon of the 100 Years' War, able to fire 5 to 7 arrows per minute, able to break cavalry charges and shatter infantry formations. But they were only deadly as long as they had arrows. And at Poitiers, after days of fighting and raiding, after skirmishes that consumed sheaf after sheaf, the English archers were conserving ammunition because they didn't know how long the fight would last. Days of skirmishes had already reduced their stock more than they wished. If the arrows ran out, the battle was lost. The French outnumbered them 3 to 1. Without the archers, the English army would be slaughtered. But 50 yards behind the line, in a muddy field choked with broken wagons and exhausted horses, a young supply runner named Thomas was fighting a different kind of battle. A battle to keep the arrows moving. A battle that would decide whether England won or lost this day. The English army was deep in French territory, raiding and burning their way through the countryside in what was called a chevauchée, a brutal campaign of economic destruction. Edward, the Black Prince, led the army. His strategy was simple: destroy French resources, avoid major battles, get back to English-held territory with as much loot as possible. But King John II of France had other plans. He assembled a massive army and pursued the English relentlessly. The French were exhausted from days of pursuit, but determined. Now, the English were trapped near Poitiers, forced to fight. In the English camp, the quartermaster, a grizzled veteran named Robert, stood in front of stacks of arrow crates, counting what they had left. Thomas, barely 16, stood beside him, helping to count up the remaining arrows and keep track of the numbers. Nearby, Fletchers worked tirelessly, repairing damaged arrows, straightening shafts, replacing feathers, checking points. These craftsmen had been working since dawn, salvaging every arrow they could from previous skirmishes. Each repaired arrow could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Thomas wasn't a soldier. He was a supply runner, a camp follower, the son of a Fletcher who'd followed the army to earn coin.
"60 crates, maybe 1,200 sheaves total."
Robert's face was grim as he finished counting. Thomas did the math in his head. 1,200 sheaves, 24 arrows per sheaf. That's about 29,000 arrows. It sounded like a lot, but they had 3,000 archers. If each archer shot just 10 arrows, they'd burn through 30,000 in minutes.
Is it enough?
Thomas asked. Robert shook his head.
Not if the French infantry charges hard. Not if this drags on.
Can we get more?
From where, boy? We're 50 miles from the nearest English depot. The French are between us and resupply. What we have is what we have.
Thomas looked at the crates. Each one was heavy, 40 pounds of bundled arrows packed tight in wood and leather. Moving them across muddy fields, through narrow roads, under potential enemy attack. It would be brutal work. But if they didn't do it, the archers would die. And if the archers died, everyone died. Over the next few days, the situation got worse. The English armies skirmished constantly with French scouts and raiders, quick hit-and-run clashes that burned through supplies without ever becoming full battles. Each skirmish meant arrows loosed into the trees, into the dirt, lost forever. The Fletchers worked around the clock, but they couldn't keep pace with the losses. Every evening, the count of usable arrows dropped. Archers spent arrows every day, 50 here, 100 there. The crates emptied faster than anyone expected. By the time the two armies finally faced each other at Poitiers, the supply situation was desperate. And then the roads became a nightmare. The baggage train was supposed to follow the army to its sheltered position, behind the hedges and vineyards, keeping the supply wagons protected but accessible. But the French roads were narrow, rutted, choked with mud from recent rain. Wagons got stuck, horses stumbled, axles broke. Thomas and a dozen other runners worked frantically to keep things moving. They pushed wagons out of mud pits. They redistributed weight when axles cracked. They led exhausted horses by hand when the animals couldn't pull anymore. Robert rode up and down the line, shouting orders.
Keep them moving! The battle's starting! They'll need these arrows in minutes!
But the wagons were too slow, too heavy. And then the worst happened. French cavalry appeared on the flank. Not the main army, just a raiding party, maybe 50 riders, but enough to threaten the vulnerable supply train. They saw the wagons. They saw the opportunity. If they captured or destroyed those arrow crates, the English army was finished. Someone screamed. The wagon drivers panicked. Some tried to turn around. Others whipped their horses forward. The entire train descended into chaos. Crates fell off wagons. Arrows spilled into the mud. Thomas grabbed an axe from a broken wagon and ran to help defend the train. He'd never fought before. He was terrified, but he knew what those crates meant. The French riders charged. English men-at-arms who'd been guarding the baggage train formed a thin line. Spears against horsemen. Desperate fighting. Thomas swung his axe at a horse's legs as a rider tried to grab a wagon. The horse reared, the rider fell. Thomas didn't wait to see if the man got up. He just grabbed the wagon's reins and pulled it away from the fighting. The skirmish lasted maybe 10 minutes. The French riders retreated, either because they realized they couldn't take the train or because they saw English reinforcements approaching. But the damage was done. 2 wagons were lost, hundreds of arrows scattered in the mud, unusable, and the train was now even further behind the army. Robert grabbed Thomas by the shoulder.
We can't wait for the wagons! Take runners! Carry what you can! Get it to the archers now!
Thomas looked at the remaining crates. He knew runners couldn't carry full crates across the battlefield. They'd need to break them down into bundles and sheaves, maybe 24 arrows wrapped in linen or carried in leather bags. And the battlefield was half a mile away.
As many as you can before they run out.
Back to the present. The battle is raging. The French cavalry launched an opening charge. But the real danger came from massed infantry and men-at-arms. French infantry and dismounted knights carried out the main assaults. The archers shoot, arrows darken the sky, horses fall, riders crash to the ground. But the French keep coming. The English had positioned themselves brilliantly. The approach to their line was narrow, forcing the French through natural bottlenecks. Hedges lined the flanks. Ditches had been dug. The terrain trapped the French attackers, making them easy targets for the archers. And the archers are almost empty. William has no arrows left. He stands with his bow useless in his hands, watching other archers fire their last shots. Some men are already picking up rocks, preparing to throw them if the French reach the line. This is desperation. Then, from behind, a shout.
Arrows! Arrows coming!
William turns. Through the smoke and dust, he sees them. Camp followers, pages, boys barely old enough to fight, stumbling forward with bundles and sheaves of arrows wrapped in linen, carried in leather bags and wicker baskets. They're running. Some are limping. One boy has blood on his tunic from an arrow wound. But they're carrying the supplies. Thomas is at the front, a bundle of sheaves clutched against his chest, legs burning, lungs screaming for air. He's been running for what feels like hours. The battlefield is louder than anything he's ever experienced. Arrows whistle past him. One slams into the ground at his feet. He doesn't stop. He reaches the archer line and drops the bundle. His hands are bleeding from the rough linen wrapping. He doesn't care. He rips it open. Sheaves of arrows spill out. He shouts.
Take them! Take them!
William grabs a sheaf, 24 fresh arrows. His hands work automatically, pulling one, knocking it, drawing, loosing. The rhythm returns. Around him, other archers do the same. The line comes back to life. More runners arrive, more bundles. The flow of arrows resumes. Not a flood. They're still rationing, still careful, but enough. Enough to keep shooting. The French infantry hits the line again. The archers fire, volley after volley. Men-at-arms scream and fall. Knights tumble in the chaos. The charge breaks. The French pull back, regrouping for another attempt. Behind the line, Thomas collapses to his knees, gasping for air. Robert kneels beside him, gripping his shoulder.
Good work, boy. Now go back and get more.
Thomas looks at him like he's insane. Go back? Run that distance again? Under fire?
We've still got 20 crates back there,
Robert says.
and they're going to need every arrow before this day is done.
Thomas forces himself to his feet. His legs shake, but he runs. The battle unfolds in 3 main phases, each French assault coming as a massive wave. Each time, the English archers drive them back. Each time, it costs hundreds of arrows. The supply runners make trip after trip, carrying bundles from the distant wagons to the fighting line. Some runners fall, hit by stray arrows, trampled by horses, collapsing from exhaustion. Others take their place. Thomas makes 4 trips. On the 5th, he can barely walk. His vision blurs, his hands are raw and bleeding. But he carries another bundle forward, because he knows what happens if he doesn't. And then, after about 2 to 3 hours of fighting, something breaks. The French army, battered by endless arrow volleys, exhausted from days of pursuit and now hours of failed assaults, begins to collapse. Their formations disintegrate, knights flee, infantry throw down their weapons. King John II of France himself is surrounded and captured. The battle is over. The English have won. William stands among the archer lines, surrounded by empty quivers and spent sheaves. He fired over 100 arrows today. So did every other archer. Together, they'd unleashed tens of thousands of shafts. And they'd won because those arrows kept coming, even when it seemed impossible. Thomas sits in the mud near the abandoned supply wagons, too exhausted to move. Around him, other runners and supply workers collapse. Some cry, some laugh. Most just sit in numb silence. Robert walks through the scattered bundles and empty sheaves, counting what's left. Not much. Maybe 5 crates, 100 sheaves. If the battle had lasted another hour, they would have run out completely. If the French had captured the wagons early on, the English would have lost. The Battle of Poitiers was remembered as one of the greatest English victories of the 100 Years' War. Historians wrote about the Black Prince's tactical genius, about the longbowman's devastating power, about the capture of a French king. But they rarely wrote about the runners, the boys and men who carried bundles of arrows across muddy fields under enemy fire, the supply workers who fought off French cavalry to protect wagons, the Fletchers who repaired damaged arrows in the shadow of battle, the quartermaster who calculated down to the last sheaf whether they'd have enough. Without them, there would have been no arrows. Without arrows, there would have been no victory. The archers got the glory, but the suppliers won the battle. If this story of desperate logistics and last-minute heroism amazed you, wait until you hear about the weapon that needed no resupply at all. War elephants. Living siege engines that could break entire armies with just their presence. Click on it, and we'll see you soon with another forgotten medieval story.